There's a little heart left in your heart for everyone, for everyone. I'm like an ant on your map. Right? Welcome to Backtracking, the show where two old friends take a second listen to influential bands' catalogs track by track. I am Jay William.
And I'm Dan Fiden. We'll be taking this journey together, providing context both personal and historical on some legendary bands. For our second season, we've picked none other than pioneering indie rockers American Music Club. J. William Hall, we are back for the second episode on American Music Club's 1993 debut, major label debut, Mercury. How are you doing this week?
About the same as last week.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Well, that's good. Well, listen. Let's we're always progressing, aren't we? Speaking of progressing, why don't we progress right into track one on side B? There is a lot to discuss in this side B. And so I want to dive right into it. I do not want to waste another minute. The first song is Dallas Airport's Bodybags. It is 2 minutes flat, and it is right here.
Shuffling through people like cars. I can't find anyone to take my losing hand. Winning streak left me high and dry. A winning streak that slowly drains from the land, hanging by a thread. I'm hanging by a thread.
Okay, J. William, what do you think about this very interesting lyric?
So I read this as a commentary on the band and touring life.
Yeah.
Obviously we're in an airport. We're in Dallas, which seems kind of random. I don't know what the body bags part of it is referring to exactly. It's hard to tell from, there's no explicit mention of body bags in the lyrics.
Yeah.
But hanging by a thread, that's kind of the chorus of this one, and it feels just like he's singing about the touring life and just being stressed out.
Yeah,
that's my interpretation.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't take the touring life thing in there specifically, although I don't think that I think that works with kind of my general feeling. So this has always been one of my favorite songs on this album, and I really, really do love this song. The lyric, this is probably a really dumb thing, but like there was a period of time when I used to spend a lot of time in airports, and I would listen to this song frequently as I walked around an airport, as if you couldn't kind of get any more on the nose. But I always just found it as this very interesting snapshot of a feeling of like really oppressive social anxiety in a very public place where, I think that could literally be an airport in the case of this song. But it's this feeling of like seeing all of these other people, these strangers, and being in close proximity to them, and none of them really kind of knowing these deep uncomfortable feelings that you're feeling. And this sense that like, gosh, like I'm in this weird spot and I'm like doing everything I can to hold it together so these people all don't think I'm crazy, but I'm hanging by a thread. And I don't know, there's just something about that lyric. It isn't quite as dark as the way I kind of described it, but I don't know. I always found that to be a really compelling lyric. I've always really liked it.
I like your interpretation better than mine.
Okay.
Because now I'm sitting here looking at them and I'm, forget me, I pray to the day. Don't see me this way.
Yeah.
Jumping out of my skin. Like I think like social anxiety, that does sort of describe that. I think pretty well. And, maybe it's a desire to not be in the spotlight. Like you just want to disappear, but you've got all these people, you're shuffling through them like cards,
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I want to talk about the lyrics because, as much as I have kind of been a grump about the approach that I think the band and Mitchell Froom took on some of these songs, I think this is an example of him taking a very similar approach to what he took on What Godzilla Said to God, to what he took on If I Had a Hammer, for example. I don't think they work in those latter two examples, but I think it works great on this song. I love the drums and the production of the drums on this song. I love that they're distant and a little muffled, and they sound like shuffling feet. You know what I mean? I kind of they have this feel and cadence of like shuffling around an airport. I have no doubt that wasn't like a literal intention by the band, but the output of the recording really kind of made me feel that, and I love that about it.
Yeah, this is not one of my favorite songs on the album, and
Really?
I can't really explain why. You're right though, like the because I note that it's these shuffly kind of brushes drums, like it has that same drum kind of vibe going to it as some of the earlier songs. There's a lot of layers. There's like little layers of violin, accordion. The bridge goes in an interesting thing where there's almost this like sitar kind of sounding thing going on.
Is that a sitar or is that like a reversed something? I couldn't tell, but it's interesting.
Yeah, I couldn't tell either, but it has that kind of effect, this disorienting kind of effect that I think does sort of serve the lyrics. There's something that's very sing-songy about this one. It like sounds like almost like a children's.
Yeah.
The melody is very kind of sweet, and I don't know, like I not that I love like it's like, oh, it's got to be the ugly Eitzel, it's got to be the depressing like dark Eitzel, but I don't know, maybe it's just with the word Bodybags in the title. It's like, but I mean, this is the beauty of AMC. It's like it's a mix of sort of feelings all at once.
Yeah. It definitely is that. Now, it's funny. I mean, you brought up Eitzel's. I think you brought up Eitzel's vocals here a little bit. I would agree. It definitely has this sweet, almost sing-songy thing. I love Eitzel in this mode. I don't love him in this mode all of the time, but when he there are a few songs throughout the catalog where he really sticks to this very breathy, very sweet, very soft tone in his voice where he's not pushing it at all. He frequently totally pushes it and sometimes kind of pushes it past the point of breaking, which I think can also be a really powerful thing. But in this case, I just like that he's doing this really sweet, soft mode vocally. And I also think, we've talked about keyboards before. This is a song that I kind of feel like the keyboards work really well on this song. I like them. I asked myself, would I like this song better with a nice reverby pedal steel? And I think my answer is yes, but I don't know that that's really worth much of anything because I'm just kind of imagining it. But I overall, I think this is probably the single song on the album where it feels to me as though the underlying song probably is something very different. And when Froom and the band kind of got a hold of it, they took it into this very different, bouncy, jangly, direction that we've talked about. And I think it works great. I actually just really like this one. I'm interested to hear that it's one of your less favorites. I can understand why, because it's not. I think it's most indicative of the song that it maybe is most indicative of. That's pre-Mercury AMC is like Royal Cafe.
Yeah, that's a good comparison. I don't think it's. For me, it's not as compelling as Royal Cafe. But,
I would probably agree with that. I would probably agree with that. All right, well, listen, are we ready to move on from it then?
Yes.
Okay, Apology for an Accident is next. It is 3 minutes and 57 seconds. Why don't we just dig right into it?
But I would rather count on your love instead of daily eating my good thing just go to waste. Honey, it's a little weak. Yeah, it's weak for my taste.
All right. I love the complexity of these lyrics, Jay William. But why don't you dive in first? Tell me what you think.
That's a cowardly move, making me go first.
Listen, I will go. I'm happy to go first if you'd prefer that I do.
No. Hey man, I can take it. I can do it.
All right.
Here's my thing about these lyrics. They're very poetic, very stream of consciousness.
Yes.
To me, this sounds like a story of like,
Yeah.
you made a pass at somebody, like a romantic gesture, towards somebody.
Yeah.
Who you thought it was gonna work or whatever, and they recoiled, and you sort of realize in that moment, like, you know what, like, I'm not really interested in you anyway.
I think that some of the verses are a little bit opaque. It's difficult to really tell exactly what he's talking about, but I have this impression that this is a really good example where Eitzel is embodying kind of a character, or in fact himself, whatever it actually is this feeling of a shift from like deep, honest self-loathing to a real bitterness, and then again to like a real kind of like earnest, loving, almost hopefulness. So he kind of goes from this full self-loathing, right? I'm an expert in all things that nature abhors, right? And he goes through that whole thing, and there's no sense that there's no question that there's this sense of direct rejection. But when that rejection kind of lands, it turns into full bitterness, right? He's like, yeah, honey, it's a little weak. Yeah, it's weak for my taste. And that's really it functions, at least in my mind, in two ways, which I think is really cool. It's this bitter, like, yeah, well, I never liked you anyway, kind of a thing, right? Yeah, what you're saying is kind of, it's defensive and nasty and bullshitty. But then it also is this kind of on the sly reference to alcohol, right? This drink is a little weak for my taste is kind of the phrase that you would hear, right? And I feel like there's that, like, yeah, but at the end of the day, this is, what I'm looking for is something else, right? Yeah, it's alcohol.
Yeah, you're a wimp. You're weak.
Yeah.
You're not willing to do this,
Yeah, but I just think those combinate, and then he's like, he goes into that, like, I just called you up to see if you want to go out and drink a little wine. You know what I mean? And so there's this real hopefulness in there too. And I feel like that those kind of shifts from like this self-loathing to hopefulness to like this nasty bitterness kind of is just really interesting. It's tough with Eitzel's lyrics. I don't want to kind of act like they're more autobiographical than I know them to be. And I certainly know nothing about who he is as a person, but it's natural, I think, with a lyricist that's as kind of confessional as one thinks he is, or he seems to be, to kind of make those assumptions. And I think it paints this really interesting, complicated picture of the author. And to me, it feels truthy. I don't know if it's truthy, but it feels complicated in a way that somehow feels real.
Yeah, I mean, that's the Eitzelian genius, right? It's like somehow being able to convey all of those things at once. It's complicated.
Yeah.
It's not black and white. Like, I think you're exactly right. It's like, there's a bitterness, there's a self-loathing, there's like all of those things and a hopefulness, still searching for that love,
Yeah.
All kind of built in there. And the music in this song, I think, supports it. It feels like it sets the scene.
Yeah.
It's like it's set in a bar or in a club where there's sort of like this like smooth jazz kind of band kind of playing in the background. And, the singer is narrating the scene, and all of the production supports that kind of vibe.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, as we transition into the music here, there's one moment in this. I really, really love the music and actually I love the production of this song, I should say. But there is this one moment that just really struck me, and I was like, gosh, there are these moments with this band that you're just like, that just is like a perfect little moment. It's this when he's singing, but I would rather count on your love instead. You know that line? He sings, he's kind of swelling his voice, the emotion is swelling there, but he goes, but I would rather, and there's a beat and the whole band hits that beat. It like pauses, but I would rather, and then there's that boom, count on your love instead. And it's such a nice moment where the band kind of comes together in this cool way. I mean, it's pretty, it's like Sinatra-y in a way, right? I love that moment. Is that did you notice that moment at all, JW?
Yeah, this is one where it feels like the band is watching him.
Yeah.
And like waiting for like the moments where he's gonna go big, and they come in big right behind him. You know, like it's very locked in that way that I think, you know, some of the best AMC material is. I will say, the first like minute or so of this song, like, I think because the production is so kind of like straight up like jazz lounge kind of feel, I'm like kind of bored, you know?
Oh, really?
I'm kind of bored for like the first minute or so of the song, but then it eventually, like, you know, it lifts, and as his vocal performance goes up, like the whole thing kind of goes to this very dramatic place that I am into, you know, but I don't know what it is about the beginning. It just feels a little kind of like, to me.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm just being honest.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a song that kind of builds in drama over the course of the song. The second, there's a swell in that second verse that I just absolutely love. I also love there's this churning noise. I don't know at all what it is in the background of the second chorus that I love. And then finally, like, again, kind of reinforcing that sense that it's building. There's this piano triplet thing that's played at the beginning of the last chorus that I really like. And it's one of the, it's a very noticeable, very kind of high in the mix piano moment. Yeah, and I just really liked it. I don't know. I do have to say, I think this is one of the better executed songs on the album, personally.
The one instrumental note that I made was about Voodie. Again, like, this is one where in the end, like the final chorus is where he's, you know, it's a little weak for my taste, and he's kind of hitting the climactic, and Voodie is just going wild on the guitar. And they keep it, you know, it's not prominent in the mix, but it just adds to the drama kind of churning behind everything. And you know, I just want to give a shout out, because like I feel like Voodie has a lot of those, they're subtle because they're not dominant in the mix, but they're very avant-garde, left field, you know, guitar dynamics that he's doing, that it contributes to the atmosphere so well, you know. And this is in the context of what is otherwise a sort of like smooth lounge band kind of performance, and he brings like that edge, you know, to the music. So, you know, I wanted to point that out. But, you know, this is a song too that, like, dynamically it gets super quiet, like almost like stops. Yeah. And then it builds to this like incredibly dramatic, you know, several times over the course of the song. So great band performance, and I think captured well, you know, produced well in this case.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, it's an interesting song on here. All right, are we ready to get into Over and Done? Yeah, okay. 3 minutes and 5 seconds. Why don't we just dig right into this controversial track? Let's go.
Crutches, canes, and faces that were washed away from innocence and pain. They don't care just wanna get the whole thing over and done.
Okay, so the lyrics.
Controversial.
Controversial.
Like, what's controversial?
Well, I'm going to tell you what's controversial when we get into the music. But first, let's talk about the lyrics. These are very dark Chanel No. 5 like lyrics, in my opinion. It's kind of a cousin to Chanel No. 5. I believe the setting is the same. It is out the window of his Cap Street apartment onto the Mission, right? I think it's the Mission. And
okay, we're talking about San Francisco's
Mission District. That during these years, pretty rough neighborhood. But unlike Chanel No. 5, which I think is a portrait of the same scenes of kind of darkness and poverty and some desperation, there is a real sense of like hope against that darkness in Chanel No. 5, in my opinion. This song lacks all of that hope. It is just a dark, dark, dark lyric. And my interpretation of really the entire thing is this line that's delivered within the context of the music in this song. We had a good time, we had some fun, but we just want to get the whole thing over and done. Feels a little kind of upbeat, but it really, I think, is just like, we're basically ready to die is kind of the message here. And maybe I'm over dramatizing it, but that's really the way I took this one.
Yeah, it seems like an observational, he's observing what's going on outside his window. And this is where the sex work happens in San Francisco. And, it's sort of just, I guess, the dynamic of, what does he say? Cap Street is an underwater cave.
Yeah.
Great this is a really cool metaphor. Like, he compares the whole scene to like it's something that's happening in this hidden from society place, like underwater cave. It's filled with crutches and canes, which I interpreted as crutches being broken. I saw it as like the Johns coming in, and it's like they're either broken men or canes. They're old men, who are coming in and picking up the prostitutes or whatever. That is how I interpreted it. And the prostitutes, they're waiting for Jacques Cousteau, who of course is the, famous French underwater sea explorer. And it's like, they're waiting for somebody to come and notice them, so that they can go do the work.
Ooh.
But they really just want to get it over and done.
Yeah. This is a different interpretation than I had of this song, but I like yours much better. I think yours is like much more right on.
Again, it's a curious topic, I guess, for what was I think the sort of first single off of the album.
Yeah.
And it's catchy. It feels more like a single. It's got like a very different, like almost like funk, like Niles Rodgers style kind of guitar thing, like going during the chorus that I do not think like funky has ever, turned up in the AMC catalog prior to this.
Yeah.
But, cool song.
I'm gonna, all right. So why is it controversial? We're into the music now. So in the book, they reference, they're talking about kind of what Mitchell Froom does with these songs and some, how these versions vary from earlier demo versions of the song, of some of the songs. They call out this song in particular, and Sean Body says essentially that the version of this song, the earlier version of this song, is like a real kind of like rocker with this great sing-along chorus, but it is like a driving rock song. And it's clear that Sean Body just really dislikes what Mitchell Froom does with this song. He kind of like, I don't remember exactly what he says, but it sounds like he's basically making the claim he's just kind of taken all of the guts out of this song for some reason. And I've never heard another version of this song, and I was curious if you have.
I haven't. Like, I know that there was at some point, I don't know if Eitzel self-released it or whatever, but there was a a collection out there called the Mercury Demos. I have the track listing for it, but it's not anywhere that I could find it online. So I have not heard the demos from this album.
Yeah, I mean, it may be something that at some future episode, if we decide to do kind of a demos or anything like that, we could take a listen to. In some ways, I think it's, Songs of Love Live, I think the performance of Nothing Can Bring Me Down, I think in many ways kind of just sours me on the version of that song that appears on this album.
Mm-hmm.
I do like in some ways hearing the kind of quote unquote official version of the song on the LP that the band puts out and like assessing it on its own merits before digging into the oddities and demos and stuff to make to then make a judgment whether they improved it or didn't. Because in some ways it's like regardless of what the path was to get here, this is the definitive version of the song. It has to be because it's the one that they put on the studio full-length album of the, you know what I mean? Does that make sense, what I'm saying? It's kind of like, you may like the demo better, you may like the live version of it better, but the band, you would assume, thinks this is the best version because this is the one that they have on the album. You know what I mean? So,
or the record company decided, because this is the song that introduced the album, I think, to the public. And we referenced earlier, do you remember there was the Over and Done promo CD that was sent to radio stations, and it led off with Over and Done, and then it had snippets of interviews with the band interspersed between songs from their previous albums. So this promo CD was meant to introduce DJs, to American Music Club, and it led off with Over and Done. And so I don't know if that, ahead of time they were like, it's going to be Over and Done, but this definitely, I like it, but I can understand what you're saying. Like if the demo was more of a rocker and then Mitchell Froom kind of smoothed the whole thing out, in order to make it more palatable, to DJs.
Yeah. I
get it.
This is one that I just think is, again, it just doesn't work at all. And I don't think the underlying song, at least to me, is as interesting as Nothing Can Bring Me Down. But I just feel like it just never really reaches liftoff. Again, you got these sleigh bells in here that are just super evocative of like Crowded House. You can almost hear that, hey now, you know what I mean? Like happening and you hear that in it, but the difference is so stark, not because Eitzel's songs are not as good as what's his name, Neil Finn's songs, but they're just super fundamentally different, right? There's something like the darkness in this song and in these lyrics is pretty undeniable, and it seems to me like just somehow or another it's just a very strange exercise to try and, like you said, smooth it out and make it this jangly, riding down the road, driving down the road in our, Suzuki Outback with the, Visualize World Peas sticker on the back or something.
You've convinced me. I hate this song now. No, I'm just kidding. Hey, everybody, I'm just kidding. I still like the song, but I do think it's curious that they decided this was the lead-off single.
Yeah,
and
very strange.
They put it in the 10th position on the album as the lead-off single, like buried on the second side. Like what a kind of, I don't know. I question that. The other thing I question is, and I'm sure you're going to agree with me on this, this is an example of a fade out that is a cop out. It's a cop out fade out.
Hallelujah. Hallelujah. You are preaching to the choir. It was in my notes as well. I am super glad that I didn't have to say it and you did. But yeah, it's a total cop out. It sucked.
Guys in AMC, if you're listening to this, I apologize. And maybe you already talked about this. You probably did. But this was an opportunity. The song is called Over and Done. You could have a sudden you're singing the chorus, they don't care to have some fun. You're gonna get the whole thing over and done, over and done.
Yeah.
And stop. Everybody stop all at once.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe that's what you did live.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I really do look forward to hearing the demo version of this one at some point because I'm curious. I mean, Sean Body definitely kind of, I don't know that he raves about the demo version of this, but it's clear that he likes it quite a bit better. And I do think there's some real shortcomings in this one. Now, probably enough said. We don't want to beat that one up too much. Why don't we move on to Johnny Mathis feat. JW.
Can you tell me?
Classic. 3 minutes and 40 seconds. I'm really looking forward to listening to this one, so let's go.
All my hopes are unraveling, and I just lost my lease on my house without love, doors or windows without peace. And with a wave of his jewel-encrusted hand across the glittering Las Vegas scene, he said, you gotta learn how to disappear into silk and amphetamine.
Okay, JW. I am going to dive into the lyrics because I can't resist. I cannot resist. In my opinion, this song, more than any song in the Eitzel catalog, is the quintessential story of Mark Eitzel. This is Mark Eitzel telling the Mark Eitzel as a musician and songwriter story in the form of a song, right? It is, and it's obviously that. He's not kind of obscuring that, but I think the execution of it is so incredibly impressive. And it has all of the characteristics of Eitzel's, I think, entire catalog. Every element that you kind of hear popping up in other songs appears in here. It's got the absurdity of many of his songs. It has the humor. It has this highly confessional nature. It has this kind of genuine, earnest hopelessness. It's massively self-effacing, but also quite honest. Like you like, I have to be. I can't say that when I read the text of these lyrics, I feel like Eitzel is being too hard on himself. You know what I mean? I think in some ways he kind of nails it in here. And I don't know. I don't want to keep raving about it, but I just think that these lyrics are brilliant, borderline genius, just wonderful, wonderful lyric.
I will say that this has never been one of my favorite songs on the album. Like, I was sort of surprised, like back in the day when the album was actually released, that this was like sort of a single. And I remember seeing a video for it. I was like, what the fuck? Like, I think it was the first video I had ever seen. It was when I was studying abroad in Australia. Yeah. And I remember there was some music video show on the lounge TV. Yeah. And this song came on and I was just like, oh, and and I remember I didn't love it at the time. Upon backtracking.
Yes, here we go.
And I really dug into the lyrics and really dove a little deeper on Johnny Mathis. Like, I knew who Johnny Mathis was superficially, like, chances are, too much, too little, too late to tell apart again. Like, I knew the name and I knew who he was. I could picture him, but like, I didn't know anything about him. Yeah. And so I read kind of like, I did my research on Wikipedia about Johnny Mathis, but he is such an interesting figure, and it's perfect that Eitzel, lays his songs at Johnny Mathis's feet. Johnny Mathis was from San Francisco. Yeah. He was this, smooth vocal performer from the 1950s on. He was a, for many years closeted gay man. Yes. And I think even at the time that this song was released, I don't know that he was completely like out, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, and so in the song, you know, Eitzel is asking him earnestly, like, you know, what, like, how do I do this? How do I, you know, make a career, you know, out of this? And, you know, and he imagines Johnny Mathis telling him like, hey man, like you got to disappear into the character. You've got to disappear into silk and amphetamines, like a drug hazed character, you know, to get through it. Like that's what you have to do, you know?
Yeah.
Long story short, I came around to really appreciating this song on a whole different level.
Yeah, I'm so glad to hear that. I mean, I think there are these like really candid. We're gonna move into the music as well, but I think that there are these lyrically these really candid criticisms and comments about Eitzel's work and Eitzel that he makes through the voice of Johnny Mathis within the context of this song. Like when he's like, you know, you were on the right track then, you know, but you were a lamb jumping for the knife, when he's kind of referring to the early kind of, you know, he looks at the punk rock posters and he kind of says that. So he's saying that there's like there's something in there. But, you know, he also says things like, you know, why do you say everything as if you're a thief? Like what you stole has no value. Like, you know, those lines. And I do feel like in that, it's like Eitzel really earnestly critiquing his own work. And you get this really interesting insight into what must be a powerful force, semi-self-destructive force for him, where he's just a little bit too critical of himself, and maybe that is the thing that prevents him from really doing what it is that, you know, this character of Johnny Mathis is kind of telling him to do, which is fully embrace the showman thing. Just disappear. You've got to let your you know, the real you, that just goes away, right? And I think that is the fundamental, in some ways, that's kind of like the root problem that it feels to me as though Eitzel struggles with in his life as a performer. It's like, what I do, what enables me to do this so well is this, you know, strip mining of myself. And that's that's non-viable, but that's the only way I know how to do it. And that's just like, that's a paradox that he kind of like wrestles with. I don't know. I mean, I obviously you can tell by how I'm getting into these lyrics. I've always thought that this was an incredibly interesting song, lyrically and really beautiful lyrically, and just like insightful and interesting. And I have to say, it's only deepened after backtracking this. I think it's like, it's in some ways Eitzel explaining everything about Eitzel to the listener that it makes him both confounding, but also the reason we're still talking about his work 40 years after, you know, some of these songs were written.
This song definitely is one of the, like, the canon. This is like, you know, if you're going to name the big 5 AMC songs, like this has got to be one of the 5.
Yeah.
Like, you know, and this is a case where I would say Froome, I think he gets the production right on this one. I think like it, you know, it's got an orchestral build, you know, when it gets to the chorus, and Eitzel kills it, you know, like with a great vocal performance. And, you know, I have no qualms with any of this.
No, I mean, but I think you got to dig in more on that Eitzel vocal performance. You said it's a great Eitzel vocal performance. I find this vocal performance mesmerizing because when you listen to this song, you can hear Eitzel in his vocal performance change from Mark Eitzel to Johnny Mathis as the lyrics change perspective. And it's not always just the choruses, right? But he goes into this like soaring, really dramatic delivery every time he's singing the Mathis words, and it's much more downbeat and kind of less dramatic when he's singing as Eitzel. And he like embodies these characters in a really, really cool way. I just think it's like such an interesting fucking performance by Eitzel. It's like a masterclass. It is a very high drama song that I think is best appreciated if you know the rest of his catalog. Like, I would never tell somebody listen to this song as like an entryway into Mark Eitzel, because I think it really needs to be understood after you understand, you know, earlier songs, different performances, more intimate, kind of low drama or low extravagance performances. But once you understand and appreciate all of that, then hearing this song, it's really just like, I don't know. I find it like amazing. And I agree with you. I think the production is really good. I think the way it's I mean, it's perfectly appropriate swelling where it needs to swell. There's some, but the only thing I will say is, like, I believe that he's using a mellotron here instead of like live strings or anything, or like a synth.
Oh, okay.
I could be wrong about that, but you kind of hear a little bit of the warble. I love mellotron usually, but it feels a bit. I almost feel like if you're gonna go big, which this song really kind of wants you to go big, I think you go right to like full strings. You don't do mellotron. You don't do. You know what I mean? You gotta like do.
You get out there and you hire the Los Angeles Symphony.
That is right.
For one afternoon.
You get Michael Kamen out there and you say, all right, Michael Kamen, now that you're done doing the orchestral Don't Want to Miss a Thing with Aerosmith, I want you to come over here and do this, right?
Right.
But, you know, that aside, I think this is just it's a classic. It's an absolute classic.
It is a classic. And this is also something that just occurred to me as a name that we kept referencing through the first few albums of AMC, Bruce Springsteen.
Yeah.
And when Eitzel would have one of his big vocal performances, we'd be like, it's Springsteenian.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like you could hear him singing. You cannot hear Bruce Springsteen singing this song or I've Been a Mess.
No.
You know, like, and that is a mark of how Eitzel has evolved. Like he has become more something singular, you know, and I think this song is a song that could not have been written by, could not be performed by in the same way as Mark Eitzel.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. I think that's a great point. This really is, I mean, this is just a singular song performance, everything. It's excellent.
Bravo!
But should we move on to the hopes and dreams of Heaven's 10,000 Whores? It is 4 minutes and 20 seconds. Why don't we go ahead and listen?
I didn't sell you anything, my dear. You were a scarecrow looking for a bonfire to sleep on. Believe me if you can, said the pile of bones. I think that this is all there is left to see. Just waiting for my prescription to come. 'Cause every second hell dissolves more of me.
Okay, Jay William. Again, I feel like I've said this a number of times, and it probably betrays the fact that I just think the underlying writing on this album is really, really strong. But again, some of my favorite lyrics on this album. I think they're just really, really beautiful.
This is one that, I mean, obviously one of the themes on the album is, you know, I suppose prostitution or, you know, sex work or, you know, that's where he was living and that's what he was sort of seeing outside of his window. Yeah, and this one is very, it's in that sort of zone for me, but like it's also kind of hard to understand a lot of it, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm gonna ignore the title of the song kind of completely, although that line does appear in the lyrics. But I really kind of interpreted this as he is again having a conversation with like a romantic partner here, and he's essentially they've broken up or they are breaking up, and there's a sense of him saying, you know, I I thought you weren't going to do this to me. I thought it wasn't going to be like this. I thought love wasn't going to be like this. And the other side of the equation is this kind of, you know, perhaps fictional kind of person saying, listen, this was never, I never promised you really anything. You know, you got into this totally on your own. You've made up these, you know, you are the one that came in with those expectations and those hopes. That's not something that I kind of gave to you. And I think it's, you know, it's like he's saying, you know, he gets afraid that you're going to leave, or he's afraid that you're going to get in the way of him leaving, right? That there's going to be this thing. And then the sad cashier here, I think, is really kind of the other party, the counterparty. And I think a beautiful line, but a telling line is, I didn't sell you anything, my dear. You were a scarecrow looking for a bonfire to sleep on, right? And I think that really is just kind of like it, right? You were fundamentally self-destructive. Any of the behaviors that you're kind of like acting surprised about, this is all of your own making, you know? And I think the rest of it just kind of feels to me like, you know, a bit of like, I just don't even want to try. I don't want to try at these relationships anymore. I don't want to, you know, I have a sense that I want to give up. And that really is kind of captured pretty well in the, so don't bother asking now, you know? Anyway, I like these. I like these lyrics. They are a bit opaque at times. It's difficult to know that my interpretation is worthwhile at all. Yours may be much more worthwhile, but I personally just find these really evocative.
I remember at the time, you know, seeing the title and thinking that felt like a deliberate, like trying to be edgy.
Yeah.
You know, kind of title. And that's unfair, but yeah, this isn't one of my favorites on the album, I'll say. Like, I think like, and part of it is the music and the production. I feel like it's a little like there's never a moment that really grips me, I guess, on this song.
Yeah, I think it's another one of those examples where the production here somehow pushes a song that feels like it wants to be a bit more downbeat or slowcore into this strange mid-tempo bouncy thing, but also oddly depressing, you know? So it just feels somehow dissonant. I really like this song, but I just don't like the production on it. I do think there are some interesting things that I'm not sure we've seen much of or really any of in the catalog up to this point. There's some Eitzel harmonizing with himself on here. And I don't remember hearing that elsewhere. I mean, there's definitely some harmonies of like Danny Pearson, Danny Pearson harmonizing with him. That's like on many of the albums, or doing like just background vocals, maybe aren't straight harmonies, but are, you know, he's singing another line. In this, there's like, you know, 2 tracks of Eitzel, each track him singing a different line. And it's interesting. It doesn't, I don't think it works great, but it's interesting.
This is one that I'm not to give it away too soon, but it doesn't make the cut. Jay Williams' version of the album.
Yeah.
It's a non-album B-side.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Fair enough. And again, it's another false fade out. I don't hate it here, but it, you know, again, this is really the first album. You'll note this is really the first album where they've got fade outs.
True.
Yeah. So just, you know, file that away in your fade out file. So are you ready to move on to More Hopes and Dreams?
Yes.
This is going to be quick. I think we'll see. More Hopes and Dreams. It is 1 minute and 55 seconds. Let's go. All right. So clearly we don't need to talk about the lyrics. There are none. Not a lot
Right.
to talk about here in the music, but I did want to kind of ask you this, JW. There's really, it's two questions. Number one, can you explain why this is on the album? And, you know, a little bit more context. There was a trend in these days that maybe you can talk the young people through to put what they called hidden tracks on albums or on CDs. This was really a thing that you could do kind of for the first time on CDs.
Right.
Is this somehow a hidden track related thing that they've done, or what really is happening here?
I remember, and I could be totally wrong, but I remember reading something somewhere that this was a recording of like an electrical transformer or a telephone box or something outside of either like the studio or Eitzel's apartment. It was just like a found sound kind of thing. Like it was something buzzing or making this noise outside, and somebody went out and recorded a couple minutes of it. And they decided to put it on the album. I don't know why. You know, I don't think this was a hidden track because it was listed, you know, as a separate track on the track listing. The hidden track trend was hot at this time, the early 90s, you know, CDs, and it was like, oh, you know, there's an extra song on the CD that isn't listed on the track listing. It's the hidden track, you know, and that got people very excited.
Yeah, and sometimes they do it so like on a CD, you know, you'd see on your CD player the track number. And so sometimes you'd be listening to CD, it'd be like, you know, on the back of the CD, it would say there's 10 tracks on this album. You'd get to the end of the 10th track, and then it would be like track 11, and that would maybe go for 10 seconds. Track 12, another 10 seconds of just silence, right? And then, you know, you'd have to go all the way to like track 98. And track 98 was just like a full song. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
I don't really know why everybody did that. It feels like that was just kind of like a couple years where people were doing this, but it was definitely a trend around this time.
It was very cool, and then it became very cheesy.
Yeah, yeah. But you know what always struck me as strange was when there would be hidden tracks that were like killer tracks, like great songs. There's one example I'm going to give you, and I'm not going to remember the name of the song, but this is a very obscure Ohio band, Over the Rhine.
Oh, yes.
Off of their album, Eve, off of their album Eve. Thank you. There was a hidden track. It was like track 90 or something, and it was like one of, or maybe the best song on that album. Do you remember this?
I do, and the reason I remember it is because, you know, as you remember, Over the Rhine came and played at our college.
They did.
When we were there, and we wound up having to kind of host them in some capacity at the college radio station.
Yeah.
And so I knew this album, that album in particular of theirs, pretty well. And yeah, I know which song you're talking about, and it's a great song. It's very moody and very different than other things on the album. And yeah, it was a good move.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, listen. So more hopes and dreams. I think we're basically just going to say this is a bit of a mystery why it's on here, but there it is.
And again, I will say that like this is a deliberate, non-commercial move.
Yeah.
To put this on the album as its own kind of standalone track, and I kind of admire it.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen. We're at the end. Let's finish it off. The last song on side B is Will You Find Me? 4 minutes and 6 seconds. Let's listen.
Well, I'm sure I don't care. All I want out of life is to hide somewhere. Will you find? Will you find me? Will you find? Will you find me?
Another great Eitzel lyrical opener. If you ask the man in the toll booth, that whole line is, I just think really it really kind of brings you in. You want to know where he's going to go with these lyrics throughout the rest of the song. I love that that first line. I think it's great.
I agree, and I think coming off of the sort of like found sound couple minutes of the More Hopes and Dreams, and it is sort of like this sort of palate cleanser, like and then it's like this is the grand finale of the album, and it starts with just like voice and guitar, like kind of quiet, but it's a very compelling opening line. It is like the great, it's a great first line of a short story or something, it hooks you right away.
And I have to say the entire verse that begins with come out wherever you are, said the fisherman to the sea. I miss you. But I think that verse is, again, classic Eitzel, so beautiful, so sweet, but such a strange way of kind of taking a metaphor that you think where it's gonna, there's from Brandy, from what's the name of the band that sung Brandy?
Brandy, you're a fine girl.
Exactly. There's is it Golden? It's not Golden Earring, but whoever that is, like Brandy, like there's any number of songs that are kind of fisherman, like
it's Looking Glass.
Looking Glass, but like fishermen dreaming of being home and their lover that's home. He takes like what you expect is going to go that way when he's like come out wherever he said the fisherman, and then he's and it's actually the fisherman kind of like having this interesting love relationship with the sea, and I don't know, I think it takes an interesting turn. I think it's like, I don't know, quite lovely.
In some ways, each of the verses, there are 3 verses in this song, but each one is distinctly different, like could be from a different song. Like there's not continuity, direct continuity between, the first verse where you have the man in the toll booth, and then the second verse you're talking about Halloween and astronauts. Yeah. And then the third verse, it's the fisherman in the sea. Yeah. But the thing that ties them all together is the chorus, the "Will you find me?" just kind of like plaintively asked again and again. So it's like each verse is a situation set up where the punchline or the chorus is, somebody longing to be found.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, moving into the music a little bit, the first note that I have here is I love to hear this pedal steel. I really, I just love, it makes me appreciate how well it works to back Eitzel just doing Eitzel. When Eitzel is just doing a simple Eitzel, I'm singing this song simply with kind of emotive swells in the background. I just think the pedal steel does really well. And I think that in some ways you can compare the mellotron in chorus 2 of this song to the pedal steel in chorus 1 and really kind of make your decision. Like, should they have done much more pedal steel on this album instead of keyboards? Not that they're mutually exclusive, but that's kind of in practice what happened. You've got Everclear, a pedal steel album primarily. You've got Mercury, a keyboard album primarily. And you can kind of make your own assessment of which you prefer. I probably the way I'm phrasing the question tells you which one I prefer. But I do think it's kind of interesting to hear within the context of this one song.
Yeah, I mean, when you do hear the pedal steel and if you like pedal steel, then you want more of it, and that's how I feel and that's how you feel. But, I recall that interview of Everclear that we talked about that was really like, oh, this is the sound of a pedal steel player producing and writing and blah, blah, blah. So it's like there are people out there, I think, who had a knee-jerk. They didn't like pedal steel, maybe because it reminded them too much of country music that they, didn't like or whatever. As we said, people were so much more tribal, back then about their tastes in music. And, but the thing is Caffin doesn't use it like a typical straight up country Western he uses it to create these atmospheres,
Yes.
which is what he did all over Everclear. And I agree with you. I would have preferred a little more pedal steel on this album.
Yeah.
I felt like that was a sound that they invented almost,
Yeah.
like to combine that with Eitzel's style of songwriting. And that could have enhanced some of these songs, or maybe made them feel more but the thing is too, it's like they were trying to do something different. You don't want to repeat yourself,
Yeah.
but I do think Caffin is underutilized on the album.
Yeah. No, I would agree. I think the last thing that I would say about this one, when we're talking about pedal steel and all of that, the production on this song, to my ear, almost would fit on Everclear, right? And it's really kind of the only song that I would say that about. And I just have to say, to my ear, that's an improvement. I think just where I end with this song and with this album overall is I appreciate some of the things that they tried to do on this album. I appreciate that they experimented with the production. And I think in certain spots, it worked really, really well. But overall, I just think that an approach to Eitzel's songs that's more like what they've done on this track, Will You Find Me, is I just like it better. I think it works better for AMC.
One of the things on this song that separates it from a lot of the album is that there are no drums on this song, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And, like we sort of complained about like too much percussion and exotic percussion like throughout the album. And this one strips it back and it's that space again, it's that sort of cinematic AMC dreamy, kind of space. And, I think it's a great ending to the album. I do love like when the full, the Mellotron and the, all of it comes in on the final chorus where it's just lifts it to this like, really evocative place and sort of like lets you down gently,
Yeah.
I think that's really cool.
Yeah. No, it's a great album ender. So Jay William, we are now finished with side B of Mercury.
Whoa.
So you know what time it is. This is the moment where it's your opportunity to shine. There is a gold medal up there on the podium, and it's just waiting for you to reach out to grab it. But what you're going to have to do in order to grab it is to answer a couple of questions, and you're going to have to knock it out of the park. So I want you to just shake it out and just tell me, what is the worst song on AMC's album Mercury? What is the worst song?
The worst song, in my opinion, IMHO, for you younger listeners, is Keep Me Around. Keep Me Around.
It's interesting. Okay, so I'm going to have to answer you. I'm going to have to respond with a little bit of a corollary first. I would say that if you're going by the standard rules, I would have to say More Hopes and Dreams is the worst song on the album. Now, I understand why you didn't pick it because it's not really a song. So I have two on my list as well. But More Hopes and Dreams, I think, if you consider that a song, which they seemingly did because they named it as a track, I would say that's the worst. Now, if you exclude that one, then I'm happy to report that, yes, you are correct. Keep Me Around is the worst track on the album. Congratulations, Jay William. You are 50% of the way to being a champion.
Woohoo!
Now, the only thing left here is to determine what everyone wants to know. What is the best song on American Music Club's album, Mercury?
It's interesting. Before like backtracking this album, like just in my memory of the album, I don't think I would have named either of these two songs as the best song on the album. I have a side A best song and a side B best song.
Okay.
Side A best song is I've Been a Mess.
Yes.
Side B best song is Johnny Mathis's Feet.
Okay, that's excellent. But what you're doing is you're trying to get away with something. We're not going to let you do that because we're not doing side A and side B. There is one best song on this album. You're going to have to decide.
I'm going with I've Been a Mess because
I've been a
that is the one that surprised me the most upon backtracking how much I was moved by it, in a surprising way.
Yeah.
So that's my pick.
Okay, well, that's your pick. I think it's a great pick. It's a great song. Unfortunately, is not the correct answer. You were so close. The correct answer can only be Johnny Mathis Feet. This is an absolute classic. Just a masterwork. I'm sorry that you got that wrong, but I'm sure that you'll apply this experience to your work in the future, and you're going to grow as an AMC listener and as a backtracker as a result.
Well, the good news is both of those songs make it onto J. William Hall's revised edition of Mercury, the quote, "Stewardess, can you fix me" edition.
Okay, I wanna hear it. Tell us what it is.
I'm not going to belabor it, but it's 10 tracks. Okay, I've trimmed the album from 14 to 10. I'm not saying that the 4 tracks I cut are bad. Those are going to be spun off into a non-album EP. Okay, so track 1, side 1, Gratitude Walks, no change. Track 2, we're going to switch it up, Over and Done. If that's your lead single, you need it in the second position, coming in after your kind of like moodier, evocative opener.
Okay.
Track 3, I've Been a Mess. This is a showstopper. It's a track 3. It's a different feel from Over and Done. Track 4, Hollywood, 4592. Track 5, the previous track 2, If I Had a Hammer.
Okay.
It's a great way to close side 1. You're talking about Maybe I'm Almost There. It ends side 1 on an optimistic sounding note.
Yep.
Track 2 kicks off with a sudden surprise, Challenger.
Ooh.
We're launching you into the chaos.
Yes.
Track 7, what Godzilla Said to God. We're going to put that at track 7, which I've often said the second position on side B is where you put your weakest album track. Okay.
Interesting. Okay.
That in this version, that would be the weakest one. Track 8, Apology for an Accident. Track 9, Johnny Mathis's Feet. It's the penultimate track, and then we let you out easy with Will You Find Me.
Yeah.
We're going to spin off into a non-album EP. Keep Me Around, because it's still good. It's a good song, but it's a non-album single. Dallas Airport's Bodybags, Hopes and Dreams of Heaven's 10,000 Whores, and we're going to end it with more Hopes and Dreams because I appreciate the intent, even if I think it makes Mercury at 14 tracks maybe a little overlong feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. I have some quibbles with that, but overall I think that's a great approach. I like it. Listeners, why don't you tell us what you think of Jay Williams' approach here? Do you think that track list would be an improvement? No, don't tell me right now. Write in. How are you going to write in? Well, I'm going to tell you. You're going to email. It is backtrackingrocks@gmail.com, or send us a message on some of the social media at backtrackingrocks, at Instagram at backtrackingrocks, on Reddit, the American Music Club subreddit. Just put a comment, put a post in there, do whatever you want in there. We will see it, I promise. If you want to send us a direct message, though, it's backtrackingrocks. There is no other way to get in touch with us. There is none. Just do one of those things. For God's sake.
We're fortunate to live in a time where there are multiple avenues through which we can communicate with one another. However, does the ease with which we communicate with one another in this modern age sort of deteriorate the depth and breadth of the communication?
Yes, the quality. It is the quality of the prose we're looking for, not the accessibility of that prose. Okay?
Something like that.
Yeah. Something like that. That is something. There's something there. I don't know what it is, but we'll figure it out. All right, so listen, Jay Williams, thank you again. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your thoughts. And of course, I appreciate going on this journey with you. Next week, we are going to be covering American Music. I think we're going to be covering American Music Club's album San Francisco.
Yes, I think that is the plan. This is the final album of this phase of American Music Club.
Yes, that's right. So I'm looking forward to that. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you, American Music Club, for making these great albums and providing us all of this good stuff to podcast about. I'm not going to thank you for appearing on the podcast because that seems, like it's an outside chance at this point. Well, hey, listen, there's always an opportunity for us to turn that relationship right around. Okay. That's going to be it, Jay William. Thanks again. We will see you next week. Bye.
Bye.